Committee,
Go
and
ahead.
we're gonna just be doing a welcome. So I know we usually try to do like a icebreaker type thing. So I would say, what did you eat for lunch? And what is your favorite thing about fall? Because it's still kind of fall. So I ate some tacos, and my favorite thing about fall is the leaves changing colors.
Nice. Do you want to pass it to somebody?
And I pass it to Meredith.
Hi, everyone, Meredith Joris with Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign. Um, I had for lunch a very quick lunch because I've been in back-to-back meetings all day, but it was a quick little salad with some homemade chicken meatballs. Thank goodness for meal prep. And my favorite thing about fall, I just like the change of seasons. Like I like the colors, but yeah, like just like the physical act of the change of season and all that brings. And I will pass it over to Robin.
Hey folks, I'm Robin Kunkel, she, her pronouns, and I had I had some Wendy's to bounce back from having to do a blood sugar test where I have the opposite problem. So they gave me lots of sugar and then I crashed from it. So I had to come back from that. Now I'm good. My favorite thing about fall, I love the temperature. I like not being at either extreme and being able to wear layers comfortably. I'll pass it to Katie.
Thanks, Robin. I had a really quick sandwich. I like aspire to do more meal prep, so always good to nothing special for lunch today, but really enjoy being cozy. So I have a very thick fall sweater on, which I was like, it's probably too far, not quite Christmassy enough. I like fall colors, like the color palette of wearing clothing that's like ochre and green and so I love the earth tone, so it's kind of my season of clothing. And then I also just like warmer sweaters and cozy things, so that's really nice. And I will pass it to Kimmy. You haven't gone yet, right?
Hey y'all, I'm Kimmy Ishmael. For those of you who don't know me, I am the policy coordinator at Community Farm Alliance, but I'm also a staff member for the Kentucky Food Action Network for KFAN. So I'll be in and out, but letting some other people take the reins today. And for lunch, I was actually at the state capitol annex today, so I ate in the cafeteria and they had barbecue pork today and it was pretty good. So I had that, and I'm going also like with Katie. I love fall because I love being cozy. Like I have on the cardigan, like I try to make sure like I have my blankets on deck, so I just love being cozy. And I will pass it to Mike.
Hello, everybody. Mike Jackson, Kentucky Greens Urban League. Today I had my can of peaches and applesauce. Best thing about fall for me is I can catch up with them. And I'll pass to, I'm sorry I'm driving, but I did see Grace.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Grace, she, her pronouns. I work with the Food Literacy Project. I had some sweet potatoes today for lunch, which, yeah, just really one thing, and it was great. I love about fall the vegetables, salad and winter squash coming. It's like the sweet spot where you might have the last of the tomatoes hanging on, and yeah, all of the bounty of the fall. Um, I'll pass to Dee. Have you gone yet?
Oh, hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm Dee Owens with the Organic Association of Kentucky. I just started in October, so I don't think I've had the chance to get to know everyone yet. I had leftover kimchi fried rice for lunch just 10 minutes ago. very quick meal. And my favorite thing about fall is putting the garden to bed and like getting to think about what I'm going to do in my garden next year and not have to worry about the million things that I've like forgotten to do. Ashton, have you gone yet?
I haven't. Hi, I'm Ashton with Change Today, Change Tomorrow. For lunch, I had a veggie sandwich and some fresh fruit. And one of my favorite things about fall, I couldn't think of my very most favorite, but one of my favorite is going to bonfires and like playing music and telling stories with people. And then I'll pass it to Tarina. Have you gone? Or Tanya?
I think Tarina and Dala haven't gone yet.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
gone already, but thank you.
Okay, yeah. Dala.
Hi, I'm Dala Emerson in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and today I had a barbecue sandwich at the high school. It was really good with a pear, and my favorite thing about fall is definitely the temperature. I love that it's just chilly enough to wear something nice and cozy, but not too cold and not hot. So, yep. And Tarina, you're back on so you can give us your feedback. If not, Robin, take it away.
Feel free to put it in the chat if you want to make any comments. Alrighty then. Meredith, does it work for you if I share my screen and you just let me know when you need me to switch slides?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. Get our slideshow up here. Thank you all for being here. Oh, and I think we just had one more person join. Who's that? Icy. Oh, okay, cool. Everybody from Change Today. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to introduce yourself. Okay, can everybody see that? Awesome. All right, so today what we're planning to cover in this training is why you would want to tell your story, like what kind of things you could actually accomplish with that, how to use your story to create change and advocate for policies that you would like to see, or to advocate for avoiding policies that you think would be harmful, how to build a moving story that will actually encourage our lawmakers to listen and to make the changes you suggest, some best practices, and then we'll have time for some role play and practice in small groups as well. So you won't necessarily have to like tell your story to the whole big group, but we'll get a little bit of time just to practice having to say these things out loud. First of all, though, I'd appreciate it if you'd fill out this very quick poll. I just want to see people's like confidence level here across the board. And if you're on your phone or just having to listen, it's okay if you can't participate in this part. All right, a little bit across the board, lots of folks in the middle feeling okay about it, but could be more confident. Thank you. There we go.
Great. Are we all set, Robin, to kick things off?
Yeah,
All right.
how about it?
All right. Well, hopefully by the end of the training, we'll see some of those numbers go up in confidence. But let's talk about the power of stories. People respond to and remember personal firsthand stories a lot more than they remember stats and detailed arguments. And the story that will land is always going to be your personal story. When you tell a story that you have an emotional connection to, those feelings absolutely show. What draws you to a certain cause? Why does it matter to you? Why should it matter to the person that you're speaking with? And why are you taking time out of your extremely busy days to share your personal story? Maybe it's not your own struggle, but family or friends or members of your community, or maybe you see it, as a larger civic responsibility. Whatever it is, make it first person, find one concrete detail that makes it memorable. And we'll dig into kind of all of those best practices a little more later. But the bottom line is that your authentic voice and your reason for being there and here today is what will resonate and will ultimately inspire people to take action. That's always the goal. I think we can go to the next slide. So how can you use your story? Where are the places to use it? I'll first say that at the end of the day, where and how you share your story is ultimately up to you, but these are just, some examples. Your personal story is essential when meeting with lawmakers, when you're doing that direct lobbying. Lawmakers care deeply about what their constituents think. They do polling to figure this out. They hold town hall meetings to figure this out. So when you walk into a meeting with a lawmaker, your story plays the essential role in that meeting. This is different than, providing committee testimony, which is a little more formal and more, on the record, but your story is critical there as well. Your personal story is powerful as part of presentations, panels, events, and slide decks for presentations, not unlike this one. And your personal story is also important with media. You can share it with a reporter who is writing about a topic you have firsthand experience with, but also personal anecdotes are really help bolster opinion pieces like op-eds and letters to the editor that show up in newspapers. So I would love now just to ping it over to Tanya to share her experience with some of these tactics, as I understand she has some experience here. So Tanya, could you talk a little bit more about how you have shared your story in any of these ways or in other ways that maybe aren't listed on this slide? I don't know if we have Tanya back.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
came in. Checking on that chicken. Yep. Oh, yeah.
So Tanya, can you tell us a little bit about what this slide's about?
Okay, so that was with House Bill 7, and I didn't get to, share my testimony because they changed it up all sneakily, like I think it was like 30 minutes before everybody was supposed to talk. But it's okay because we prevailed and we end up they still send out my testimony and stuff, and taking a picture with my colleague Kimmy, and I had some reporters that wanted to talk to me, and so I was able to still share my story and stuff. And so if you Google me, you will see a few news reports that I'm in, and things like that.
Did you feel all right going into telling your story? And did that change like after you actually got to do it?
Oh yeah, because I mean, the one thing about your story is it's yours. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really change, you know. I mean, of course, you can always refine it once you understand more about the statistics and things like that. And having helpful colleagues helping me understand about what the numbers mean, and why that's important. Because I feel like that just adds to it. Like, when you're doing an English paper, and, you can say bad, but if you say, horrendous, that just adds, and so just putting a face to a name, making it personable, using the word constituent, very powerful word, and just like letting them know, like, that you're here and that, and you matter, and letting them see that. So That's the greatest part about sharing your story, is letting them know that.
Awesome, thank you. We have another member here. Who is this? Yeah, so this was our former board member, Leandra, who works at Food Chain, some of you might have heard of. And she was able to share her story through an op-ed. And I think one of the great parts about this was that she didn't really have to seek out a lot of information. It was just about her own experience. So she had been a SNAP user. She had food stamps. And really all she needed to talk about was how that impacted her growing up and the decisions that led her to have to make. And I think that's really where folks can get kind of tied up in this storytelling, is feeling like they have to know things that they don't know, when really all she had to talk about was things that were already in the back of her mind. There is also the option to always write your story out. Now that can be to the media, like Leandra did, or that can also be to your representatives and your legislators. So here we have just kind of like a generic template that you can use. And I'm a big fan of templates. We'll go into one later, but you don't necessarily have to be somebody that wants to stand up in front of a crowd or be on a microphone or be the face of an issue to share your story and still make an impact. You can also call the hotline. The folks that work that hotline in the Kentucky Capitol are incredibly sweet. They're not biased. They're not there to argue against whatever you're saying. They're there to just write your message down and make sure it gets to your legislators. So it's very easy. And once you've done it once, you'll see that it's not nearly as overwhelming as some of us might have felt like it would be at the beginning. So how do we build a moving story? Do you all have any ideas about what makes a moving story for you? Feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat, whichever.
I know for me is, talking about something that means something to you, because, we can all talk about anything. And, I believe, you can articulate things that are important, but, people can feel the difference when you're just reading something versus when like it's something that actually impacts you. And that's why it's important, because both things are important, because you want to talk about the facts and you want to talk about the emotions. That's why it's like I always say, it's like peanut butter without the jelly. You got to have both, and so when you have both, people can feel that. And, like if me and you were talking about the same thing and we're coming from two different spectrums, we still are talking honestly about how we feel about it, but we're coming from two different sides of it, but we're both sharing how we feel and things like that.
Definitely. That's a good point, Tanya. Anybody else? Well, some things that definitely help are to keep it short and sweet. It's not necessary to have like a 10-minute spiel most of the time. In fact, it's pretty rare that you would even get that amount of time when talking to a legislator or a reporter. So figuring out what your main point is and making sure that there is a clear beginning, middle, and end of your story. Just like with fiction writing or fictional storytelling, just for funsies, you want there to be a rising action, so you're working your way up to your main point, and then there's a falling action, and at the very end is where you would then ask, I'm asking you to vote no on this proposal. So really just making sure there's those three main points and that you could fit it into a 2 to 3 minute span is good. If you have extra time, they can ask you questions, you can elaborate, but it's probably best to just assume you won't get a ton of time right off the bat. Some other things that really help are starting off with the story of yourself. Like Tanya was saying, you want it to be meaningful to you. Otherwise, they're going to wonder why are you even here? Like, why are you talking about this? So it can be because you have personal experience, or because somebody that you love has personal experience, or you've witnessed something someone's experienced. But you need to connect it to, like, I am talking about this because. And then I like to think of it as working from that like smaller perspective out. So you start with yourself, why you are there, and then you work out to the story of us and how this issue is not just about you. You are one person who has experienced it when there are many of other folks who are experiencing it right now. And then you build out to the story of now, which is to give them a certain sense of urgency about why they should be taking action on it. So you're going from like this is meaningful to me, this is meaningful to lots of people, this should be meaningful to you right at this very moment, and you need to do something about it. And like I said, I really like templates. They help me especially if I haven't had to do something for a while. So I testified on a bill last year, but it's been a whole year and maybe I'm a little out of practice. So I love having something like this that gives me specific pieces of my story to make sure I fill in. So for example, I could say, thank you for meeting with me. I asked you to meet with me today to talk to you about food insecurity, going into my particular experience. I'd like to tell you about a time that I went from being food secure to very suddenly food insecure. Moving on to what it meant to me, this showed me how quickly my circumstances could change, and that any level of security I thought was going to be consistent through my life, there was no guarantee of that. What that means for others is that they could go through the very same thing. Therefore, I'm asking you to make sure that food security programs are fully funded for people who fall into situations like I did. Just as an example. I also find this really fascinating. I know very little about psychology, but I find the theories really interesting, and this is one of them. It's called the moral foundations theory. Now, this is a very simplified version, and there's a bunch of theories in social sciences, and they don't all necessarily agree. But what I think this is helpful for is to break down these 5 main values, these moral judgments that humans tend to make. They are based on harm, fairness, a sense of being in an in-group or belonging, authority, and purity. And as you can see across the political spectrum, there are trends for which ones folks tend to find the most relevant to their lives and how they make their decisions and make moral judgment about things. But there are no monoliths. So there's no one group that only has one on either side of the spectrum or anywhere on it. So it's really important to think about the person whose mind you are trying to change, or the person you're trying to convince, and think about which of these values most influences them. You want to be able to frame your story regarding that, because if you go into a meeting talking to someone who really values purity, and that's their big motivator, and you're not framing your story around purity, there's less likelihood that they're going to be moved by it. You want to frame it in a way that is relevant to them, that is relatable. So it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but you can help them understand your perspective and your issue from where they're standing. Think of it as like, picking which of these hills we each stand on to then judge everything around us. You got to be on the same hill for at least a minute to try to convince somebody. And I will kick it to Meredith.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. So we talked a little bit about, building a moving story, but I want to kind of pull this all together and dig into kind of how to prepare your message. And you can use some of these steps as you think about building your story itself, but you can also use these steps to develop any message or point you're trying to get across in whatever format that looks like. I find it to be a really handy framework in a wide variety of circumstances, whether I'm, writing an opinion piece for the media, or I'm preparing to speak with a reporter, or if I'm just even writing an email to a colleague, or getting ready to plead my case for a promotion with my boss. It's a really handy framework for a lot of different things. So first, we always start with our topic. What do you want to talk about? Why do you want to talk about it? And what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? The next slide is step 2, where we take a look at our audience. Who are you talking to? What do they care about? You can ask yourself, why you're talking to them and what you ultimately want them to know or to do. If you're talking to a lawmaker, are you trying to convince them to support a piece of legislation, to vote no on something? And then we move into the third step, which is building our content. We always start with a key takeaway. What is the number one thing that you want your audience to know? If they remember absolutely nothing else, this is it. This is the most important thing. You should make it clear, make it memorable, but also make it understandable and make sure to repeat it. And then from there, almost think of this as like a drop-down menu of your supporting points. Generally, what is the problem that we're looking to solve? What is the solution or the thing that we need to have happen? What are you doing to achieve this? And what do you want your audience to know or do? What's that kind of call to action? So if you have a number or a good fact, go ahead and use it. Remember your call to action, something that you want that person to know or do. And most importantly, include your story. And here's a scenario and kind of an example. So you're meeting with a lawmaker on Capitol Hill in DC to talk about the importance of protecting SNAP in the upcoming Farm Bill. SNAP is one of the most powerful tools we have to end hunger. We need this legislator to fight against any cuts to the SNAP program. You're there to share why this matters to you, whether it's a personal story, an experience receiving SNAP, or something you've seen in real life. You want to urge them to fight for a strong Farm Bill that includes smart SNAP policy, because SNAP is one of the most powerful tools we have to end hunger. And we'll have some more time later to kind of practice with all of that framework and practicing it. But next I want to talk about what we do when things get off track. This happens to everyone, and 9 times out of 10, it's not your fault. The reporter you're talking to misunderstands something that you've said. A lawmaker that you're meeting with asks you a question that you just don't know the answer to, and nor should you. When that happens, I want you to think about ATM. You want to acknowledge the question that they've asked or the thing that they've said, but then you want to quickly transition back to your message, ATM. And we have some examples on this screen. I'm not going to kind of read them all for you, but the one that I really tap into quite often that you can use in a variety of circumstances is, I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, so I'll follow up with you after our conversation today. But what I can tell you is fill in the blank. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I will pass it over to Tanya to kind of cover some of the best practices when it comes to telling your story.
I will say I use this in parenting too. It's like distracting by questions. Like, that's a really good question. I don't know right now. I'll get back to you. And anyway, we are brushing our teeth now.
Useful skills all across the board.
Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit of this, but then I'm kind of remix it because y'all know me by now. That's just what I do. Remember that you deserve to be here and be heard. Use data when possible, but don't stress about it. Just put a human face to the issue. Keep it short and specific. Now, keeping it short is not my strong suit. So I don't really know what keep it short means. But most of y'all, I'm pretty sure, knows that, you want to, what I say, the only time I was able to keep it short was when I was testifying in Frankfurt, which you really have no choice but to keep it short because you have like 3 minutes. And I say, like, if you want to share like the most important things, like if this is all they're going to hear from you, you want to make sure that it's like the top 3 things. And, so it's like, bam, you want to like, boom, boom, boom. And, so you just always want to make sure that whatever is the main thing, like that they hear that, and judge how heavy to get. you're allowed to be vulnerable and also allowed to set boundaries. Yeah, because you don't want to go in there like, poor me. I just had this horrible life. Nothing's ever been good for me. That might be a little bit extreme, you know. But then on the other side of the other spectrum of extreme is, you know, everything has been perfect. I've never struggled. I've never had a hard time in life. See, both of those are like extremes on both sides. But in the middle, you're like, yep, I have had I have used public assistance. And then I've had times where I've had really good jobs where I didn't need to use public assistance. So that way you're in the middle. And then you could be like some that have never had to use public assistance, but you know how it is to have an extension on paying your bill, or have an extension on paying your mortgage, or like, hey, I know how it is to eat peanut butter and jelly, or I know how it is to live off ramen. That's why I will never eat ramen again, because I've lived off of it way too long. So yeah, that's what I got for that one.
That's a really good point about not being woe is me, and like keeping to the point in the topic that you want to impress upon them, because nobody likes to feel powerless, and going up to somebody and being like, all of these 10 things are terrible, doesn't necessarily encourage them to try to fix them. That feels overwhelming. But if somebody comes to you and says, hey, there's this specific issue, here is a thing you can do about it, I'm asking you to do that, that's very tangible. It's real, it's right in front of them, and it's a specific decision that they can make. So it feels a little more like a reasonable request. Something I also really benefited from on the keep it short note, because when I was testifying in Frankfurt, they started really cutting back on people's time. They heard from all of our opposition, probably almost 10 people. And then they got to the last 3 of us and they were like, okay, we want to go to lunch, make it brief. And we saw that coming. And so I had taken a highlighter and highlighted the sentences in my printed out statement. Like, I can do these 10 sentences and they get the main point across. And I'm just going to dump the rest because there isn't time. And I want to make sure I get to the end. And I didn't want them to stop me in the middle of my testimony and be like, well, that's very hard on you anyway, we're hungry. So by doing that and by planning ahead for it, I was able to still get to the ask. Do folks have any other questions or suggestions?
No, I do want to say, I put it in the chat, but I said, don't let Tanya fib about her not being able to keep it short, because she has a good 1-minute pitch, which I recommend to anyone, especially if you do any federal lobbying or anything, because you can be cut short on time and they'll interrupt meetings to go somewhere else. So if you have your 1-minute story, it can be just as impactful as a 30-minute one.
Nice. So she can do short. I know you don't prefer to, but you can.
I'm sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little fuzzy, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'm in the car, so I apologize. One of the ways that I tend to end up sharing stories most frequently is working with other storytellers, because one of the things that you have to do is you have to establish trust with those storytellers. And sometimes it's easier for them to trust you if you have a similar experience, or they understand that you're coming from a similar place. It kind of reduces that, sometimes people feel like you're judging them when they're going to, and they don't want to open up about their story. And so that 1-minute pitch, or that just really brief, here's the outline of what happened to me, that can really help to engender trust with other storytellers when you're working with them. And so that's one of the ways that I find personally that I end up sharing my stories the most, is when I'm talking to other storytellers to get them to open up.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to frame this around, like, this is a skill that we use in life to build connections. It doesn't have to be at somebody who's necessarily an opponent on an issue or a legislator or a reporter. You know, we, like you said, we can use this to help build trust and be vulnerable with one another. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move us on to our practice then.
Yeah, I think that actually flows really nicely to this piece, because in this scenario, it's kind of that framework that I talked about earlier, and obviously based on a topic that is not at all issue based, but what it sounds like, you know, when you deliver a message with the clear key takeaway and support points, in this example, you know, it's not lengthy. It's actually one of those kind of elevator 1-minute pitches. So let's just dive into the practice. I want to tell you all about my favorite season, which is winter. Winter is the very best of all the seasons. You get to wear comfy clothes like sweaters and sweatpants. There's Christmas, you know, there's cookies, presents, pretty lights all around town that just make everything feel really cozy. And of course, there are delicious meals that you can easily make and freeze for months at a time, soups and stews in a crock pot. It doesn't get any easier than that. Winter is the very best of all the seasons. Tell me about your favorite thing about this time of year. So a little bit of a silly example, but hopefully you can tell that, you know, my key takeaway was that winter was the very best of all the seasons. You heard the support points, and then at the end, you heard that call to action, which is the thing that I wanted you to do. I wanted you to also tell me about your favorite time of year. So again, you know, obviously not using the scenario around telling your story, but that's just kind of a framework of how that looks for, you know, building that key takeaway and those 4 support points and including your key takeaway. Or I'm sorry, your call to action. Would anybody want to practice this? You could pick your favorite season, your favorite sport or food or animal, whatever comes to mind. Is anyone interested in giving this a really quick whirl?
Do you want me to stay here or on the next slide?
We can stay here. That's fine.
Okay.
No takers?
Somebody give me a spiel on something you really enjoy. It can be
I
so
got you,
silly.
Robin. I got you.
All right.
So my favorite sport to watch is football. It has great tactics and it's fun. You can watch it from your couch and enjoy it just as much as if you were in the field. It's a short season. You get to wait for it and then enjoy it and then enjoy it again the next season. It doesn't take forever. It's full of eye candy. I enjoy it thoroughly. And it has great life lessons on how to win and how to lose and how to get back up and continue. So NFL is the best sport out there.
I love it. That was awesome. Thank you for being willing to try that on the spot. That was a really great example. And again, kind of a silly thing, but it's that framework that you can practice as you develop your story. It's a framework you can utilize, you know, like I said, when you're making a case for a promotion or a raise, when you're going into your year-end reviews with your boss. You can use it, you know, with your family in different scenarios. So I really love this framework of building it out this way. I think next we're going to have a chance to kind of practice developing our stories a little bit more and telling our stories, where you can kind of tap into this framework plus all of the other tips and best practices we talked about. I think I'm sending it over to Tanya to talk about what this practice session is going to look like. Oh, sorry, I missed this slide, but we can keep going.
Okay, so practice telling your story. Hold on 1 second. Let me catch.
Was that you or did somebody have a question? Okay, I guess that was just background.
Yeah, I'm ready now. Okay. So do you want me to like kind of glance over this part, or?
Oh yeah, if you can
Give
explain the
instructions.
directions, that'd be good. I can also post them in the breakout rooms when we get to them. But if you
So-
say them out loud, that'd be good.
Cool. So you will be randomly assigned to a breakout room with 3 to 4 people. When you get there, take a minute to silently think about what your story you'd like to tell. Talk about a time in your life when someone made you feel special or went out of their way to help you and why you want to extend that kindness to others. One person volunteers to go first, tells story for 2 to 3 minutes. Others actively listen, give feedback for 2 to 3 minutes. And I felt an emotion connection when you said I would have liked to have heard more about. I like the way you ended because everyone take a turn.
All right, so there's 9 of us here. We were considering the facilitators not being in the breakouts, but since it's a smaller group, Tanya and Meredith, do you want us to just go ahead and join them?
Works for
Yeah,
me.
that's cool.
Okie doke. All right. And we're gonna give you, let's see, if there's only 2 or 3, we'll do about 15 minutes for you to practice this, and then we'll come back and kind of debrief as a whole group and see if anybody has any questions or just follow-up thoughts. So how did that feel for folks?
I love
Yeah.
talking to them and
Mhm.
learning about them and hearing about, people that like, because I was in a group with people I've already known or worked with, but like really haven't like heard their story or like known what their feelings were behind their story, because there's like we always say every time, I mean, I say it all the time, but it was a little bit different just now, but every time someone tells their story, you're reliving you're reliving trauma. And that's also like important to note as well, like, you know, we could tell our story every day or to every person, but every single time we are reliving a trauma basically, or something traumatic that might have happened to us, which is both sometimes powerful, but also like very tiring sometimes and can wear you down. So
Definitely. Our group stuck with the like I guess the happier theme, which was also nice, and I think that's probably what I am the least practiced in too, is like telling the fun, like what made you feel special stories. And so yeah, it's just I guess it's a little less energy intensive to practice that way, but also good to be able to do the heavy stuff when it's needed.
I think it's a nice reminder that stories can be, it's not just the heavy stories that can be powerful. It's kind of flipping that script sometimes and finding a story that maybe doesn't feel as draining and emotionally taxing that can still move the needle. So it's a nice reminder of that.
I saw Mike gave a thumbs up. Did you want to say anything about your group?
he was pumping gas a second
Oh,
ago
okay.
when we
He's
were in our
probably
group,
still
so
doing
he might need a second.
No, still here, guys. I heard you. But no, it's different. It's difficult telling the story, but I think I got some good insights.
Cool. Any particularly helpful advice that you think would help others?
Writing it down before you actually have to go and speak to other people. Writing it down, figuring out who your crowd is. Those are helpful things. I'm sorry, I am multitasking.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, we talked about like knowing our audience in our group, because I mean, he was talking about, he has so many stories and he has so many things, but it's like, knowing your audience, knowing that decision maker, policy maker you're about to talk to, sometimes you might talking about, a certain thing might not reach that person as much as like another different part of your story. Like just kind of knowing who you're talking to also um helps you like kind of define your story as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I
Well,
think it can be narrowing to talk about like your story as if you are just like one brief story, but your story is literally anything about your life. Sorry, go ahead, Holly.
I was just going to say that that's probably one of the reasons that I did not want to go first, because I think when you're listening to the kinds of stories that other people tell, they don't necessarily have to tell you flat out what their values and beliefs are. You can kind of figure that out based on the kinds of stories that they tell, and kind of get a sense of what kind of values and beliefs they have. So that's why I avoided going first, so I can kind of get a picture of who I'm talking to before I tell my story. So thank you to you for going first. I appreciate that.
That's very strategic. That's a really good idea. Something that I think helped with the stories in my group was having these like really easily imagined details, like having something tangible that I could picture in my mind and then kind of like keep building the picture, almost like watching the story play out in front of me. Are
And
there
I'll just
any
Oh, Robin,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to echo that just because I really liked your feedback in the breakout session. That was kind of like when you're telling a story, not just talking about what happened, but like how that experience changed you or shaped you or how it's impacted you like in the future, talking about the now, but also talking about the future too.
Yeah, it was cool to see like how these things changed people. Do folks have any remaining questions or just concerns about storytelling we can kind of get into?
So I think one of the concerns that I have a lot of times, and it's because I often work with storytellers to get them prepared to share their story somewhere else. One of the concerns that I have, and one of the things that I'm trying to find ways to talk to my storytellers to prepare them for times when their story may not be well received. Whether we like it or whether we don't, we're living in a fairly divisive time where we have some folks that are really dogmatic about their beliefs and they're just not willing to listen to or hear anyone who may have different values or beliefs, right? And so when we're talking about maybe a piece of legislation and you have legislators that are utterly committed to one viewpoint and you've got a storyteller that's coming at it from a different viewpoint, like how do you prepare that storyteller for an outcome that's not what we would like to see? How do you prepare them for, they may not get kind questions. They may not get, if they're sharing, if we're sharing their story through social media or something like that, there's every chance that people are going to make ugly comments. And so anything that you guys could share about how maybe we can help to prepare folks when there's the possibility that that story is not going to be well received, I would like to hear. I would like to hear any thoughts on that.
I can speak about a time that I was the storyteller whose story was not well received, but I wonder if Meredith has any advice for dealing with that.
I would actually love to hear your story and how you handled that. And yeah.
It was a very powerless feeling. It was challenging. I was talking about something very personal that I had been through that had just greatly changed my life. And I was testifying to a committee. So it was a large room of people, and I don't love public speaking anyway. So there were just like all these layers of me feeling uncomfortable. And I did it, and I felt pretty good about myself. Like I felt proud of myself for having done it. And immediately the response was like basically somebody taking my autonomy away from me and telling me that like I shouldn't get to make decisions about myself, which was infuriating. And I think what was so hard about it was like not being able to respond in that moment. And I think I shouldn't have responded in that moment. That was not a way I was going to change people's minds by like arguing while taking up time from somebody else who also came there to give testimony. So yeah, I think a lot of it was just aftercare. And honestly, one of the best things that came out of that was I saw an example of like how to be mindful of other people's experiences, because I didn't necessarily outwardly like show how upset I was and how like disheartening and infuriating that was. But the person that had helped me prep my story called me the next day. Like we talked later that day, but the next day she called and said, "Hey, you went through a lot yesterday, and I just wanted to see if you needed anything." And I remembered her when I saw her again, like only a couple months ago. And she's in an entirely different job. Like we didn't run into each other in the same area of work or anything, but we saw each other, and I was like, I remember you because you cared to check on me. And so it took the sting out. So there wasn't necessarily something I could do in the moment, but there were things I could do afterwards to kind of help ease the discomfort.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that experience and kind of reliving some of that. I think you hit on a couple of things that are important. I think one is just like the preparedness and the identifying the right person to tell the story for the right opportunity. So there's some pieces on the front end that we can do to help mitigate some of those scenarios from happening, or identifying the right folks who are comfortable with the potential for moments like that to happen, and also just being very straightforward and honest that in most cases, or in some cases, you're not going to be met with that like gotcha kind of question, or they're not going to be challenged, but that there's never that guarantee either. So I think the preparedness on the front end and being open and honest about that is really important. And also preparing folks with thinking of that ATM. Robin, I know that there may not have been that moment for you to kind of redirect, but preparing people for those kind of those transitions so that the conversation can be redirected in a constructive way. And also just also being present and able to in certain cases you're able to do that redirection too, as if you're in a room with somebody who like you're having a meeting and you have somebody there sharing a story, maybe there is another advocate there that can also kind of redirect. But yeah, I think just that preparedness on the front end of being open and honest is critical.
And I imagine, Tanya, not to put words in your mouth, but when you didn't get to initially share your story how you had planned to, I imagine that was pretty frustrating. But folks were able to help like figure out a way for you to share your story in a different method.
I'm sorry, I just got off the phone with my daughter's school.
You're
Okay.
good.
What was the question? I have so much wisdom. I just don't know which wisdom you need.
Holly was asking about how to like how to handle when your story is not well received.
Okay. So like how to deal with it when it's not well received? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, Tanya, in what I do, I'm helping storytellers to prepare for
Mhm.
whatever avenue they're sharing a story in. And, I know that sometimes, there are times when I know, and I do try to prepare them beforehand that, this audience may not necessarily be receptive to all the parts of your story, right? And you may get pushback on your experience or something like that. And so I do try to prepare them for that, but I'm just looking for ways that maybe we can, really help to support them when that story isn't well received and you definitely don't get the outcome that you were looking for, or you get obnoxious questions, or you get something like that. Like how do we as storytellers, and how do we help our storytellers to kind of come away with that, come away from that experience with some resilience and
Okay.
not be discouraged.
Okay, so with me, and that's why I always bring up my dad because he was like the best daddy ever. And not that my feelings don't get hurt, because they do, but I just think about my dad and he'd be like, "You are the best at everything." And so I was blessed to have someone that always kept in my mind that even if it's not received well, maybe it wasn't meant to be received well in that setting. And that's why I think what's really important is when you really have to think about your audience. And me, Robin, and Meredith had touched on this the last time we talked. And of course, you can prepare because it is good to prepare, but you also have to know how to wing it. Because say like you go into a room, you think like this is how it should be, but then you feel this different energy and you're like, even though I prepared this piece, you know what? I'm gonna wing it and I'm gonna talk about something different. And so that part you can't necessarily always prepare for. That's why you're winging it. That's why you're just kind of coming off the fly, as they would say. And that is where your discernment will come in, and that's where your wisdom will come in. And that's not something we can actually teach you. To a point you can be taught, but most of the time you kind of can know, when you're filling the room, you kind of can know how everybody's going, how the conversation is flowing, and you kind of can interject at those different times. And of course, it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be effortless. There's going to be times, like I know with me, I'm a very outgoing person, I'm very open, I'm not shy, if y'all haven't caught on to that yet. But even with me having a big personality, I still worry if I'm going to offend someone or if I'm going to make someone uncomfortable. But I just think I am me and everyone else is taken. And so I just do the best that I can to always just be the best version of myself that I can be. And that doesn't always be received well. But, at the same time, that's not really my problem. And that's just how it is. And but everyone learns different ways, and even in the bad, there's always good outcomes, because then okay, the next time I'm with this group of people, I'm going to be more like this. When this happens another time, I'm going to be like this. And those are the kind of things that you learn over time, because I've been in this with K-Fan for 3 years, and I can tell you, and I know Kimmy definitely can contest to this, and I think if Dollar's still on here, when I first started, I'm always bubbly. I've been bubbly the whole 3 years. But I definitely think when I first started to now, there is definitely some differences. So that's what I'm going with.
I see Mike had his
Positive,
hand up too.
huge difference. I just want to tell you, positive, huge difference. You're just amazing.
No, I love our steering committee.
Well, thanks for
Mike,
sharing that, guys.
sorry, losing my voice a little bit. I just wanted to see if Mike had something to add to that.
Yeah, I was just responding to Miss Holly's, question. One thing I always remember, somebody always, the saying, their perception is not your reality. That's just always something to remember. And if the person that you're talking to, if they don't get it, somebody in the room got it. And the person who might not hear what you're saying the first time around, eventually, Lord willing, they hear it down the road and it comes back and they bring action. So
Yeah, and that I think lack of immediate control is a really good thing to keep in mind, especially with these types of advocacy, just because I know that was one of the things that I learned when joining KFAN is like trying to get a bill passed is usually a 3-year process. So there's a whole lot of taking a long time to make people care before any large number of people really take an issue seriously. But if you weren't doing that work in those first 2 years, you wouldn't make it to the work you can do in that 3rd year where you are feeling more heard and seen.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate those thoughts. I know that last year we were doing some work around Senate Bill 150. And I was talking to a lot of parents of trans children, and of course they were terrified. And also, and rightly so, sometimes hesitant about sharing their story because A, it's about their child, and B, they're just really unkind people in the world. And so, trying to prepare them and understand that, maybe you don't want to put, sorry guys, maybe you don't want to put everything out there about your family because it does have the potential to have blowback for you and blowback for your kid. And so just thinking about that in the context of how we, talk to folks and help folks and prepare folks, that just became really important to me. So thank you guys so much for your input on that.
And it sounds like you're really mindful of what you're asking of folks too, which is especially good for somebody in your position. And I think for all of us is that we want to encourage folks to step out of their comfort zone a little bit and be willing to talk about these issues in that vulnerable way, and share their experiences so that we can, we can share the truth for one, but also build those connections with each other and just know that we're not alone in this. And at the same time, people have a right to their boundaries and to decide how much they're comfortable saying or not. And we need to respect that. Any other questions or things that you just mulling over in the moment?
I just want to say, this is just amazing. For real, I just have a big personality and I'm so blessed too. But I just smile so much because I wish these are the times I wish my daddy was here just to see his baby girl, just doing everything that he always knew I would do as a kid. I still remember times when he would say, I knew I knew you would do great things. He always knew that. He always believed in me. And, it's just to be a part of this great group of people. We're all from different walks of life. But we are so much more similar than we are different. And that's such a beautiful thing because our differences is what make us cool, but us being so similar, it's a beautiful thing because you can't have peanut butter without the jelly. And it's just really important that no matter what space you're in, you know, whether you're with professionals or whatever have you, like I've been in all different types of groups. I've been very blessed. I've met all different type of people, and I promise I can tell you about each set. They all are like, you just have this big personality. And I'm like, I was blessed by my daddy. But all that to say, you know, we all have our struggles, we all have our worries, we all have our insecurities. But when we look at the bigger picture and everything that we're doing in this and all these trainings, the bigger picture of that is getting everybody to be closer together. And when we all come as one to get anything done that needs to be done, the greatness of that is so much more powerful than any of our worries or any of our fears. And that's why when you push through, no matter what, like the beauty that we will see next year, the year after that, we will look back at these moments and be like, I'm so glad I pushed through that.
See, this is why we need you here, not just to tell your story, but to be the cheerleader of everybody else that needs to tell their story too. That's another big thing that I know helps me is having folks in the room, even if it's just one, who are going to be there with me no matter how crappy or how well the storytelling goes. You know, they're in it with me. All right, well, if folks don't have any other questions or things they'd like to go over, I would like to redo this poll from the very beginning, and then I'll give you all a few minutes back. So just gauging confidence at this point. And honesty is always appreciated because, I mean, you know, some of us have practiced these skills before, some of us may not have. We can always get better. Every time we do it, we get a little bit better. All right. I'll take it. Looks like some improvement. Thanks, Dee. See ya. Well, I'm glad to see that folks are feeling a little more confident now. If at any point you are wanting to give testimony on any bill or schedule a one-on-one with your legislators, or you would like support writing an op-ed or anything like that for a blog, please reach out to KFAN staff. We would love to support you in that. And that can take a lot of different forms. We'll be very flexible, but we just want you to not have to be alone in doing this.